everybody, it's Sharon here. Welcome back to my channel for those who are returning, and welcome to any new subscribers that may be visiting for the first time. So I've cleaned off my space and I still have the tile on my table, partly because I'm thinking I'd like to use it during the next part of my paper staining. So I still have my paints to the right, and I have here just some plastic cups. So they're just purchased from my local supermarket. Sorry about the noise. And I'm going to mix some paint and water. Now, I'm doing this similarly to the way I did my fabric staining. So I'm taking my plastic cup. I have some distilled water here. I should have shown you before I took the lid off. So I'll just pop some water in here. So I've probably got about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of water. And as you see, it's just distilled water from my local supermarket. Very inexpensive. I think I may need just a fraction more actually. Okay. So I just want to play with colours as they are. I don't want to mix colours at this stage. So I'm just looking to see what I have. I think I'll start with this storm blue. Now, I have a feeling this is what I used on my fabric. Again, so you can see how much I've put in there, barely any. These paints are Jo Sonia's, and these were gifted to me, but I have noticed that they're available at my local Spotlight store. So I am just mixing that in, and I'm checking to see if it's strong enough. Now I am noticing I've got, this paint might be a little bit older than some. I still have bits at the bottom. I was thinking I might need to add some more. I think I'm going to try that, see what it gives me. So I'm really just experimenting. You can see it's splashed. And I just have a paintbrush here from my local hardware store. And I am going to just wipe this across. Now this is how I did my staining when I did my other pieces. When I did my fabric staining, this was how I did the paper, except I used my box that I've talked to you about, which is actually to my right at the moment, and it has the papers in it that we have just finished making on the gel plate in our last video. They are dry and they are now sitting under a book. So I actually don't mind the colouring there, so I'm just experimenting. So I'm just using my tile and now I have mentioned that this paper, when I did this the first time, it gives a sort of speckled appearance. I'm thinking it's the paper. But I'm not 100% sure. So this is sort of only my second time using this process. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to set that one aside. And I'm really just going to stack them on top of each other at this stage. But I do want to see how this matte photo paper takes the paint water as opposed to gel printing them. And again, I am going to do both sides. This is a much more subtle way to colour the paper compared to using the gel plate, but I'm kind of working in my mind. I'm thinking about the contrast between the two. So the gel prints are quite loud and vibrant, which I absolutely love. And because I mentioned when I was doing those, I really love that. So setting that in my tray. I'm just going to spread some of these out. So these are just my scraps. This is kind of a continuation of my last couple of videos. So I've got a tray to my left of lots of different scrap papers. This is matte photo paper, just the edges of my fussy cutting. And I'm just using a couple of different processes in the last couple of videos to add some colour to these strips so I can use them in my crafting rather than throwing them out. So, and I'm just playing with ideas and with colour, and it's kind of a continuation even of my fabric and paper staining when I did that off camera. So this is the exact same sort of water that I dyed my fabric in. So I made up my paint solution or paint and water solution exactly as I did this cup here. Even used the same sort of cups. And once I had that mixed together, I added my fabric pieces to that water and just sort of dunked them around a little bit, made sure that they were saturated. And I used my little craft stick to move them around in the cup, and then I had to get my hands in there because I had far too much fabric to water. Sorry, far too much fabric for the cup is what I meant to say. And as I was pulling them out individually, I did open them out and make sure that that paint and water solution was saturated into the fabric. So where it had missed, I actually rubbed it in with my fingers and thumb just until you could see that the fabric was wet. And then I set it in a tray to dry. I left it to dry for, I think I left it to dry overnight like that. And then I need to flip these over. And then, so you can see by using the tile, I'm getting some colouring on the back as well. And then I opened the fabrics out and left them to dry until they were dry. Sometimes I did go in and I sort of laid them out flat, but I had them on top of each other in a pile. So I did go in and sort of rotate them every now and then. Oops. Okay. So just going in and doing the second side. So this whole process came about because I was staining fabric, not because I had anticipated staining paper. And when I finished the fabric, I had leftover paint water that I had made for the fabric and decided that I would try some paper to see how it worked. And I didn't want to waste the resource that I had, which was my paint water. So I was really impressed with how the paper at the time took the paint water, and since then I've thought about these scraps of matte photo paper and I've wondered whether they will take the paint water as well. So I'm here to try. Okay, so I have coverage front and back. I may have missed spots, that's okay. I'm just layering those. Okay, I'm just standing so I can pop them in my tray. I'm just layering them on top of each other, which is on top of the paper that I just did. As I said, it's all an experiment. They're looking really, really pretty, all piled up together, I must say. That piece that I just picked up, the corner was weakened from where I was trying to lift it. Okay, so I'll just show you. That is, I'm hoping the colour is showing okay. That is our pile so far. That is the piece of paper at the bottom that we did first. So, okay, so I have lots of delicious stain on my plate here. I'm going to pick that up similarly to the way I would with a gel print. Just not wanting to waste that paper, that paint. Okay, so now I know that the photo paper will take the stain okay, which essentially is paint water, and this isn't my idea. So the idea of using paint water to stain fabric came from Susan Taylor Brown, and I've been following Susan for some time now, and I just love what she does. So I'm so grateful to have found her channel and to have discovered her talent, and I'm grateful to her for sharing what she does, because it has led me to some really fun discoveries just recently, and I'm loving the results I'm getting. So this is how I did my other papers. I completely covered the first sheet, and then I added just some extra on top, and pop down my next sheet. Just sort of covering the whole sheet underneath with the next layer of paper, and then I cover this sheet. Now I do get some wrinkles, as you can see. This is my first time doing it on the tile. I wanted to check to see whether doing it on the tile instead of in my box where I usually stain, which is where the papers are drying, whether I would get less wrinkling. So it doesn't really appear that it's going to be the case, which I can tick that off my box now. I know that, or off my list. I know that I've got boxes on my brain. I know that it doesn't really matter. So usually I have my box and it's lined with some newspaper, and then I line that with some baking paper or like grease-proof paper to stop things from sticking, and to also protect the box itself from the liquid of whatever dye of choice I'm using. And I thought perhaps it was a reaction of the paper with the baking paper, but it appears it's just the nature of the paper, which is fine. I know that now. So, and I just build up my layers with the colour that I'm using. So this is how I do my tea stain paper as well. Exactly the same process. I will say, when I did my last lot of papers using this method with the paint water, I ironed the papers afterwards. Now I haven't ironed my air dried papers before, and I ironed them after they dried, and I found that I got a very similar crunch to my paper as I get when I oven dry my paper. So that was a really fun discovery. Okay, this might be my last layer of paper for the blue, I'm thinking. I want to have a play with some different colours, so the last layer of the paper for the blue, using the pieces of paper rather than my little scraps of matte photo paper. I still want to stain some more of those. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Going to see if I can lift those up, and I'm popping those aside just like that, sitting them on top of the stack that I already had that I showed you, and leaving those to dry. And just going for gold, I'm going to do some more of these strips, so I might just keep going and just show you what I'm doing now at double speed to save you, like watching paint dry, literally. So it'll be the same process on repeat, and I'll just be trying some different colors. I'm not really sure how much of this I should video. The idea was just to pop on here and show you what I was doing because I was experimenting. So I'll see how it translates. When I edit, I may end up doing just little snippets here and there and editing it together. This piece here, you can see I've still got a little bit of print on there from where I fussy cut. Leaving that on there for now. If I decide to remove it, I can when I go to use it. I wasn't particularly fussy about this one here, has some as well. Wasn't fussy about how the strips of paper were looking. Once I did my fussy cutting, I just threw them all into, I actually had them in a pile on my desk, and I also have a container with a lid that I'd been placing papers into for some time that I wanted to tea stain. So I've just pulled from those papers that were on my desk in a pile and now into it's a fridge organizer I shared in a previous video. I will see if I can link that video in the description below. It's a fridge organizer, and I saw on a Facebook page that this particular fridge organizer holds 12 by 12 papers, so I figured it would be a fun thing to get to try and see if, rather than having piles of paper stacked on my desk, I could have them upright sitting in this organizer, and it's worked an absolute treat. I really, really love it. I've got 2 of those organizers on my desks now, and they now house 2 piles of paper that were on my desks, and it's made so much more room on my desks. And the tea stain paper was just a pile of paper that I would add to as I discovered more things that I wanted to colour. So I'm really grateful to whoever that was that shared that information, because it's cleared up my desk space, which is fabulous, and yet I still have those things handy and accessible that I can just pop things in there when I want to. I also have a tub with a lid, which is a rather large tub. As I said, I've been just collecting bits and pieces every now and then. Some of the things I have in there are prints that didn't work, or they're prints where I was playing with making some of my own digital papers and I had to do a test print, and it either didn't quite work right or I had spares. So I've popped them into the tub to tea stain so I could perhaps play with them that way. Just all experimenting, really. So just adding colour to the underneath of these. I just remembered something else I have in my tray here, and something else I potentially should have brought into this space, so I may have to go and get some. I don't know if I've got some here. Okay, so again, just lifting those up, popping those over here to dry. Because I'm stacking them on top of each other, I have no idea whether that will leave some sort of impression on the piece of paper that's underneath it. as it dries, but I'm okay if it does. Oops. I am noticing I'm kind of curling the edges a little bit, trying to lift them off this tile, but that's okay. Okay, I did bring a couple in here. So I just have a couple of these envelopes that I shared in a collecting and gathering video a little while back. I thought I had brought some bigger ones in here, but I don't think I did. So I may just duck out and collect a couple of bigger envelopes. So it won't be a moment. Okay, so I hope I didn't keep you too long. I have some the larger envelopes here and some medium sized. The other ones I was looking for I couldn't find, which makes me think they may be in here buried. But they're not jumping out at me, so golly, I have some scraps in here. I also have some papers out of a diary that I want to stain as well, so okay, so just adding some colour, and I forgot that that would stick. Okay, that's okay. The tile I'm using is, I was looking for a white tile. All my other tiles are white except this one. This is like a, almost like a grey. Definitely an off-white. It's not a white. So, but I like the white because you can kind of see what colour we're getting. Okay, I love that. Setting that aside to dry. So I'm just sort of crisscrossing, and I need to sit that with the flap open up so it doesn't stick to anything, which I only just thought about, because it will. And it will stick again here, but that's okay. Okay, loving that. So just setting that aside. So these have tape over that glue area. Okay. Leaving that. So I'll do another one this size with the blue. Okay, so my paper is coming up there. I'm just stacking them on top of each other. These ones do have the postcode mark on them. I would have preferred that they didn't, but that was what I could get. So when I decorate them, I will just make sure I cover that up with something. You'll notice that I'm sort of crisscrossing my brush when I do this. I have found that quite often when I do that on paper, I don't actually see that it's making any sort of pattern or impression on the paper when I'm doing it, but once it dries, I usually notice that it does add just a detail. It's not very, it's subtle is what I'm trying to, it's a very subtle detail that I really like. So I do tend to do that because I know that it usually makes a difference. Again, I haven't used the paint water to do envelopes like this before, so it is an experiment, and as much as I say it makes a difference, when the results dry it may be quite a different story, but it's my story, so I'm sticking to it. Okay. So I've got those envelopes done. What I'm thinking is just going to add some here. Again, I'm experimenting with what I have to play with. Take some of the smaller pieces, I think. Okay, so I have my roller here. And by doing this, I'm hoping that it picks up a little bit of the paint off the surface and rolls it across the back, which leaves some different kinds of impressions. Perfect. And so oops. That was unintentional. Okay. As you can see, I'm not left-handed. Okay, so I'm liking those. Noticing I haven't got as much colour at the ends on the other side. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that one. I'm going to set that one aside. Still layering. I'm noticing some different markings in the paint by having it sitting on the tile to pick up the paint colour, so that's really, really fun. Okay. I love that one already. Okay. So this is definitely a different look than I got from painting the paper, I think. It's almost like a marble look. If you look at it really closely, it's very, very fine. But it's different. So I'm going to drag that through Did it again. Okay, I'm really loving these. Oh yes, love that. I could leave these single-sided, but I really want both sides to have that detail so that if they happen to be used on something that is hanging over a page or perhaps a tag that can be turned over and you can see the opposite side, I want to have that detail on both sides. I'm pushing that into the tile just to see if it gives it a little bit of texture, and it really has. Gosh, it's fun to just play. Just allow yourself the freedom to just play creatively. I have no idea how different these will be once they dry. I don't know whether they'll keep the patterning that I'm seeing on them now, or perhaps they'll dry and not be anything like they are now. So all part of the experiment. Oh, my voice. I'm so sorry. I'm really struggling at the moment. It's been really, really windy here and my allergies are playing up terribly. So I'm finding I'm getting very croaky and it makes it really difficult sometimes to get the words out. I love that. Okay, I want to add more to this. Love those. Oops. That was unintentional. Gosh, these are fun. I'm really loving the way they're looking. Okay, I'm going to call that one done. Now, kind of thinking I'd like to switch colours. I'm not saying I'm done with that colour, but I'm going to set that aside. And I just have it's an old coffee jar here that I use for my paintbrushes. I'm just going to rinse out my brush. Okay. And I need some paper towel. Just squeeze out some of that water. You can see it still has colour in it. Okay, and I have a damp cloth here. It's really warm here, so it's drying out quicker than I planned. It's just a Chuck's cloth. I don't know if you get anything like that overseas, but here in Australia you can get them from your local supermarket, and I find it great to clean off my tile. The downside is that they dry out really, really quickly. Okay, so another colour. Same process, I'm just using my distilled water, 1/3 to 1/4 of a cup. Now, what colour do I want? I'm thinking a neutral. I can't decide. I'm actually going to go with the burnt umber, which is like the darkest of browns that I have. But, what is this colour? Oh, a brown earth. Okay, I'm going to stick with my first choice if I can get it undone. I've done it up very tightly. Okay. So just a dollop. I will clean the top of that with my craft stick. And I'm going to mix that in and just see if I can dilute it. Remembering some of my paints, if you've watched my previous 2 or 3 videos, I don't remember how many I've done now, I've just been having fun with it. I've been playing with my gel plate and using these paints. They were gifted to me by a friend who didn't need them anymore. So I don't know how old they are or how good they are. Part of my play is just to test out and see if they're actually in working order, which most of them are. A couple of them are on the thicker side, but using them up is a good thing. Okay, so I'm just checking. I do have some floaty bits that haven't dissolved because it's an older paint, so it's not mixing as easily as it could if it was a newer paint, but I don't think it's too bad. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so I'm going to try this. So I'm just going to set some scraps on my, I was going to say my palette. Kind of is my palette because that's kind of what I use it for, but it's really a tile. The only thing I've done to the tile is I've added some foam to the bottom of it, which you can't see, but I did that in a previous video and I will try and link that video in the description below for you. I got different size tiles from a shop local to me that sells off basically building supplies that are either excess or weren't needed. Perhaps some of it had faults, so they got rid of the whole lot. Could be a building project that stopped because of lack of funds. I don't know, I'm guessing now. But they have all sorts of building supplies available at really, really cheap prices. So I think the most I paid, which was for this bigger tile, was maybe $2. And the small tiles that I have, I don't know if I only paid like 20 cents or 50 cents or something like that. It wasn't very much at all. And to give them a little bit of extra stability, I added the foam to the bottom, which I purchased from my local Kmart. They're just those, you know, the foam pads that you get, the big, they're like floor mats that they interlock like jigsaw puzzles. So that's what I've used to just sort of strengthen it. I do want a little bit more paint in there. I think it's not quite dark enough for me. Sorry, I had to grip my teeth to open that then. So just about the same amount I'm putting in there. And I'm going to give that a stir. And this will definitely colour it as it is. I would like it just a fraction darker. if I was going to explain to you how I'm judging, the last batch I thought might be a little bit light. I could actually almost see through it, whereas this I cannot. So that would be how I can tell you I'm kind of gauging where it needs to be. So that's got just that fraction more colour for me, and I'm happier with that. Okay. Song in my head. Okay. So just laying down some colour on these, and I'm just using the brush method rather than using the roller for these. Seeing if I get some variety at the end by doing it both ways. That's my aim. And I'm just thinking I will actually have to layer these on top of the last lot, so I may need to put another piece of baking paper down over the top of the ones I have drying, the blue ones, just to stop my colours from blending and becoming a bit muddy. Okay, so just pop some baking paper over the top of that last batch we did, so the blue ones. And I need to, whoops, turn these over. It's kind of like baking, isn't it? Set the timer on half and then turn them over. These are picking up quite a bit of colour just from sitting on this tile. Almost all of the underneath looks to have been covered. I love the colouring on that one. That's really fun. So's that. One thing I've found with using the paint, you really don't know how it will look until it actually dries. Like, I look like I'm going to get a really even overall cover of colour, and then it dries and I find this patterning in the paper that I wasn't expecting, and or I may not. It may be just straight colour. That's the fun of experimenting like this. So I'm just very light touch of colour just to cover up any white spots. As I said, for the most part they're well covered, and just going to transfer these across. I am stacking them, so it may end up giving me some patterning as it dries. Just sort of crisscrossing them this way. Okay, so I'm just going to pop some paper down and pick up what's there left. So for some of you who want to try this, you may not have a tile, you may have a glass craft mat, it would work the same. It's really just any non-porous surface, really, I would think would do the same thing. Just sort of allows the colour to sit on top. And I think I'm going to call that piece done. Love that. Okay, so I'm like, what do I want to do next? I think I'll do some more of these strips. I have plenty. Maybe I'll roll these. Just noticed a bit of blue in my water, so I've got a bit of a crossover with colours from my last colour. I think it's partly because of the way I'm holding my brush. I tend to hold it back like this to stop it from dripping, but I probably shouldn't, because then all the water runs to this part of the brush and then the water sits in there. Getting some fun speckling from this brown, which is really cool. I don't know whether it's because it hasn't all dissolved into the water as well, because it's a little bit thicker, but I love the effect. Maybe it's just because it's a different colour. Could be a little bit darker than the blue, so I might have more colour per water droplet, so to speak. I really wasn't sure what to expect with these rollers, but I really love this roller. I tend to be using the same one all the time, which is fine. If it's suiting my needs, and it is. I'm hoping I'm still in camera. I think I got the whole of this tile in camera, so I'm hoping that's the case. If I'm not, I apologise. Okay, so I'm going to turn over. You can see I'm getting some texture with the paint colour, which I love, which is unexpected actually for basically a water paint, which is what I've created using this acrylic or gouache. I really, actually that may be one of the things that's causing a difference between the effect I'm getting. Well, I think I'm getting a different effect between this and the blue. As I said, it stands to be seen until I look at my results once they've dried, but maybe one is a gouache and one is an acrylic paint. So this one I'm using now, where did the tube go? This is a gouache, and what colour did I use last time? The blue. Come out, wherever you are. Storm blue is also a gouache, so there goes that theory. Or maybe my theory is correct and they'll both be very similar in the way they've taken the paint. Oh, look at that. That is so pretty. Again, I have no idea if that's how it will look when it's dry, but I'm really loving that. It's almost like a speckled egg effect. And this is actually the back of the matte photo paper and not the front. So and I really don't mind, whichever one has the prettiest pattern will be the side I use. I really love those. It's not a heavy, dark watercolor paper, but oh gosh, I love it. Okay, so I need to put the paintbrush down. So that is the opposite side. They're both really beautiful. Okay, I need to stand up again. Loving them. So fun. Telling myself I'm not going to turn everyone over, and I didn't do one, and then I felt bad because I didn't know what it looked like underneath. So okay, I feel like I could do another round of those, and we're using up these scraps, which is so good. Obviously we haven't used them yet, but I'm going to do a couple of the circle ones, which I didn't do with the blue. But I do have spare blue paint, so we can come back to that if we decide to. I just know, looking at the results that I'm getting, I will use these now, that they have those beautiful patterns from this beautiful, we'll call it a watercolor. It's our own creation, our own concoction, but it's a watercolor. In my mind, it's a watercolor. Okay, so and I have to do some envelopes as well with this colour. I could be here for days. This could be a little rabbit hole that I've fallen into, and you can see here I've got printing on one side of these from where I've printed and fussy cut, so obviously I won't be using this side, but I'm going to colour it anyway. So yes, this could be a rabbit hole that I fall down, and I could be here for days. So I apologise if I go MIA. And I won't video everything. I'm afraid I really could be in here for days doing this with different colours, but at least when I show you results, you will know how I've done it. So you can see there I got a little bit of blue out of my brush because it's come from the very top of the brush, and I'm holding it up again, that's why. Perhaps if I'd taken my brush out and rinsed it under the tap instead of just in the jar of water, I wouldn't have quite as much blue in there, but it's okay. I don't mind a little bit of crossover, I just didn't want a lot. Just looking for any white bits that haven't quite taken up the paint enough or as much as I'd like. don't think that's too bad with that exception. Oh dear. Try not to knock my cup of water off the table or off the tile. Okay, so just going to turn these over. So this piece here I have printing on the underneath, so I knew that when I turned it over. Whoops, need to be more careful with these. They've actually stuck. Don't know why that's happened. Maybe it's because it's just a bit more fragile. Okay, that's okay. It's all an experiment. So I'm not going to muck around with that. Looks like this one's going to lift. I just had to be a bit more delicate. It is warming up here too. It's afternoon, so perhaps that one dried out a little bit quicker. I just noticed I've got a bit of lifting there. That's okay. Oh, I got one wrapped around my roller. Whoopsie. It would have gone, well, I think that way. Doesn't really matter. No, that way. Don't take your eye off the prize. Maybe I'm pressing a little bit heavier with the roller too. Maybe I need to stop. Whoops. I just noticed I was putting a lot more pressure on the roller, so maybe that's making it stick. Okay. I do think they're pretty good, so I'm going to shift those. Love that. Just noticing a couple that are drying that haven't got a lot of colour, so I might bring those back in and just add a little bit more to them. And just these two. I think these were ones that I painted rather than rolled. So I'm just going to go over them again. See if I can give them a little bit more colour. Not sure if they were one of the earlier ones that I did. Okay, I might do some paper. Just trying to pick up whatever colour is left on the tile. And I'm going to empty out my brush a little. I might do a little bit on the other side. My brush is just about dry. Okay, going to call that done. I have no idea how it will dry. Okay, so I'm thinking I might do some sheets of paper. So I'm going to completely cover this one, front and back. Turn it up the other way. So these are not complete pieces of paper. They are sheets of paper that had a tiny little bit of printing at the top and the bottom, but nothing in the middle. So I've just torn that printed text off, and I'm using the leftover paper because I don't like to waste it. Don't know if you ever have that. Maybe it was a receipt, or it could have been a recipe that I printed and you end up getting, you know, maybe it was one line of the recipe at the top of the page and where you found the recipe at the bottom of the page or something like that. Such a waste of paper. So, and it only ever happens to me when I'm not realizing that it's happening. So I should know better and check before I hit the print button, but I don't always do that. I have a feeling these came from a program I was using where you actually couldn't, you either couldn't delete the page, the second page, or you didn't have a choice but to print it, which is why I've ended up with so many. And if there was a way to not print it, I couldn't find it. And I do consider myself fairly tech savvy, so not saying I'm an expert, but I get my way around the technology okay. So in this instance, I just couldn't find a way to do that. So I cover the whole of the top, and then I just lay down some extra liquid in the hope that this extra liquid will be picked up by the next sheet that I pop on top. It gives me some patterning, some textured patterning with the colour that I don't seem to get with the paintbrush. And I have said before, it seems to be that side of the paper that I tend to use the most, I feel, because I do the same thing with my tea staining. So if this was my tea stain solution, which I actually have some sitting on my desk still ready to use, if this was my tea stain, I would do this exactly the same way with my papers. Adding some extra. It does make my papers wrinkly, but I found I can iron them. Not always do the creases come out, but It's a really quick and easy way to colour the paper. I can also tell you that if the wrinkles don't come out, they're the pieces of paper that I tend to use when I am making a tag or a journaling card, when I'm collaging basically, because you can get those wrinkles out with the glue and your bone folder. So I tend to use the really badly wrinkled papers when I'm collaging because the wrinkles don't matter and they're not noticeable so much. On the odd occasion they will wrinkle up once they're collaged down, but for the most part you can get the wrinkles out. Okay. See, I've got little speckles of paint in there, just because of my paint being a little bit old. Again, can't tell you how old it is, but it's a fun resource to be using when I wouldn't have necessarily known how much I would have loved it if I had to purchase it myself, because it wasn't exactly on my list of things to buy. I didn't actually know about that brand of paint before I got these, so it's been a really, really fun and unexpected discovery, and I'm so grateful to my friend who has given me these paints to play with. Okay, so this might be my last sheet because I do need to do a couple of envelopes as well. Oops. I have no idea how many I've done, I'm not counting. Okay, so I'm calling that done. I'm going to put my brush down. Hope that it doesn't end up falling. Picking those up, leaving them in the pile that they're in, and I'm just plonking those on top of the pieces that I have drying, and I'm going to leave that to dry. And so I'm going to do a couple of these envelopes. I'm actually wondering if I want to try spraying the colour over. It's a lot more difficult to see where this paint is actually colouring, so I guess it will be a surprise at the end when it dries as to whether it's actually made a difference or not, but that's okay. Okay, I'm going to call that done. I have no idea whether that's even coloured it. All it's doing is showing me, it's revealing the security lining in the through the paper basically. So I'm just going to set that aside and let it dry. Do one more like that. bit more serious with this one. Okay, calling that done. If they work, they work. If they don't, it's okay. I'll know for next time. Okay, so I like doing it that way, just plonking the water on there and did just crease that a little bit. Just going to see if I can pick up a little bit of colour for that tab there. It's not too bad. Okay, calling that done. Have no idea how much is coloured and how much isn't. I would like to do another one of those large ones. Okay. Call that done. And I would like a couple of the smaller envelopes that I have. Okay, and remembering that these will stick. So I'm just going to use my paper towel to pick up any glue. That was the only one that seemed to stick. And how the individual envelopes take the coloured water will be determined by the kind of paper that they are too. Some papers are thicker than others and some are more porous than others. So it looks like these are going to take the colour quite well. But those middle-sized envelopes I'm not so sure about, but that's okay. So how am I going for time? Oh, I'm way over time, so I need to stop there. Apparently I got caught up way in the moment. So I've had lots of fun with this. I'll probably continue and try some other colours, and I will show you the results in a future video. So thank you so much for joining me, and for anybody who's still with me, thank you for sticking in here. And I look forward to seeing you all soon, everybody. Please stay safe, stay inspired, and happy crafting. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye for now. Okay, so I'm just popping back quickly. I've just splashed some of the brown paint and now I've cleaned my brush out with my water in my jar and I'm just splashing down some blue. They're the two colours that we played with on camera. And I'm going to use my roller and just see what happens. So set that into my water. I have no idea if this is just going to end up muddy, which it may do, but perhaps I could have put one colour down and then allowed that to dry before adding another colour. That could end up with different results, but whoops, I'm going too hard, too fast. Okay, so I have no idea how these will dry or how they will look, but I just wanted to show you that I was having a little play with the two colours. So again, thank you so much for joining me. I really look forward to sharing the results and seeing what we've ended up with. I think they're going to be really gorgeous and I think they will marry really beautifully with the gel print papers that we've created. So please everybody, stay safe, stay inspired and happy crafting. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye for now.